Hello everybody. I'm just checking that we've got everybody in terms of attendees. I can't see
13.
Yeah, I can't see. I can only see this.
Just to make you organise the radio, Rachel.
Right. Okay. Right, everybody. Hopefully we are now here. I'm just going to ask you. I'm just going to check the attendee list. Just waiting for Libby to join. Libby's with us as well. If you've got any problems with sound or with seeing my screen, can you put your hand up, please? That's better, much better. Okay, so recording. So, okay, sorry about that hiatus, everybody. I think it's important that we do it this way, as I said, because what we wanted to do was to record it for everybody who is not here today. Now, we've got the same process that we had last time, so I know all of you came to the last webinar. We've got about, I think, 3 hours for this. We shouldn't need 3 hours. We might even need only 2 hours, but we'll go through the information as quickly as we can and give you the opportunity to ask lots of questions. Similar to last week, actually, the materials here are evolving. We have had lots of questions answered this week, and we're finalising the support materials for the Assessor webinar. They should be out by Monday, we're hoping. Monday, Tuesday next week. And the same with this presentation. Following today's session, we'll update the slides and we will add this deck into the pack of information that we will make available to you. Any questions, raise your hands and I'll bring you off mute, or you can type a question into the question field, as you all know. We will have a break halfway through because it is quite hard work sitting in your locations listening to somebody. It's not ideal training circumstances, but we'll have a break about halfway through. Okay, so what we're talking about today is the LIEPA processes and systems that are required to support the EPA Pro beta. Just to recap a few slides from last week, and I think a recap is always useful because a week has passed. We're currently in the beta phase for EPA Pro. We spoke about this last week. It started. We went live on Monday, the 27th of January, and now we're accepting EPA bookings for 4 customers on 4 standards. And we'll be completing those assessments through EPA Pro, as we've discussed. We've actually received our first booking onto adult care, so we've now got 1 learner in EPA Pro, and there is 1 IEPA in adult care who has been allocated and has accepted the allocation. So I know that Rebecca's been in contact with that person, and we're reassuring her that the support will be coming and giving her as much support as we can in the meantime. Business processes are continuing to evolve. From when we spoke last week, there are things that we've learned, either from the training, so the feedback that you've given us, or from a better understanding of how the system actually works, with our customers, with our IEPAs, that have encouraged us to look at our business processes already, and they are continuing to evolve. So please bear in mind, I might not have answers to all of your questions today, and you might very well suggest something which is something we would like to adopt. So it is evolving, so as many questions as you like. Bear in mind I can't answer them all, but we will put that into the frequently asked questions that we send out to you early next week. Okay, so objective of the training, give you an overview of the LIEPA processes to quality assure and manage your IEPAs and your teams, so that they can complete assessments on EPA Pro, and then a demonstration of how to use the IT systems and reports that will be required for you to support the process. We'll also be looking through the SharePoint or Teams functionality that I talked about last week. I didn't show you last week, but I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of some of the training materials for that. And as I said, it's an opportunity to ask questions and give feedback. Okay, very, very quickly, we talked about this already last week, but just to remind you, what's new? The key difference is that from the IEPA and the customer having this kind of middleman who organises the scheduling and the allocation of the endpoint assessment events, the IEPA now has much more direct contact with customer. They will be using EPA Pro as a system rather than Learning Assistant, and the EPA booking team will be supporting the process as we go along. Very quickly, again, we saw this last week, but I just thought it'd be useful to remind you, there are some key changes to the business processes. The first one, as I've already mentioned, is the IEPA owns the process to schedule those assessment dates, and this will take place through a planning meeting directly with the provider. We've already spoken about that. Assessment documents are currently stored on Learning Assistant. As I've said, in the new world, assessment documents will be shared on SharePoint or Teams. SharePoint or Teams. It's the same thing, but you might see that the link you get is to Teams, but the site is SharePoint. And the feedback will be on EPA Pro. And the results will be on EPA Pro. So this, for the temporary period through beta, we are storing documents in 2 places. But SharePoint is our single source of all the information that we need. Again, currently, EPA results are released once overall assessments are completed. In the new world, they will be released after each component has been completed in Q8. We spoke about that last week, just to remind you. And because of that, failed feedback is released to customers after every assessment, if required. Currently, the booking team owns the process for rescheduling and setting reset dates. In the new world, it will be the IEPA who owns that process, because it will be part of the scheduling conversation they have with the provider. And then finally, GoToMeeting will be organised by the EPA booking team. Now, that for the first phase, we've said that is how it stands in beta. That's not going to change. Although some of the processes around how that's done might change, and some of the forms that you're asked to complete will change. We're going to review how that works through beta to see whether it's possible for the IEPA to do that directly and more efficient and easier for them. So we'll be looking at that. Okay, now that is a recap of what we spoke about last week, but at this point, are there any questions? Good. Take that as a positive thing. So let's move on. Right, okay, I'm gonna, again, very quickly go through the process that's involved. This is important because I just want to recap the role of the LIEPA and to remind you that this process is evolving and it will evolve based on our learning. So, a caseload is allocated to the assessor by the EPA events booking team. The IEPA hopefully will accept the EPA case, and then they will meet remotely with the provider to schedule the dates for the different assessment methods within that EPA, and that's called the planning meeting. Assessments take place, and the assessment evidence is uploaded onto the platforms that we've spoken about, EPA Pro and SharePoint. EPA Pro for feedback, SharePoint for the assessor documentation and for the links to GoToMeeting. And the IEPA would use this information to make an assessment judgment. The results are entered onto EPA Pro, and where appropriate, feedback is also entered onto EPA Pro. The LIEPA's role then is to quality assure the assessment and release the results for that particular assessment, and that is done at component level. And the LIEPA has to sign off all of the results before they're released. Once all the assessments are completed, the IEPA will work out the overall results and enter it onto the platform. And again, the LIEPA will quality assure and release the overall results. Okay, we've got a question. Simon. Okay, Simon asked, is there an SLA for making the initial contact? Simon, the SLA, which we'll put into the FAQs, the SLA for making the initial contact, it's not that specific, but what we say, from when the IEPA accepts the allocation, we'd expect a planning meeting to take place within 10 days. So that's the SLA that we have at the minute. Obviously, the answer is as soon as possible, but I think we put an upper limit on 10 days. And we're going to monitor that through the beta phase, because a lot of that will depend on the availability of the different people that need to attend that meeting. If the provider is intent on the apprentice being there or apprentices being there, that might be more difficult. Hopefully that answers your question, Simon. I'm going to see if it does. If it doesn't, raise your hand. Okay. Right. So.
Is it 10 working days or 10 calendar days?
10 working days. Thank you. Okay, so just to remind you, because we'll be looking at these two key systems for beta today. So we've said that EPA Pro is this new system that we are using to do an end-to-end journey for the customer and for the assessment. It will accept registrations and bookings. It involves the allocation of EPA cases to assessors. It allows the IEPA to schedule assessment dates. It allows the customer to submit learner evidence. And it allows the assessor to put judgments on the learner's performance on the platform. It allows the LIEPA to quality assure those IEPA judgments, and it allows us to issue a result to the customer. Because this is a beta, because this is a soft pilot, a question, I'm going to pause. Hi, Mandy. I'm glad you're there, Mandy. Okay, because it allows, because this is a beta and currently EPA Pro doesn't do everything we need it to do, although it is evolving very rapidly, which I'll talk about a bit later, we will have to use through beta SharePoint or Teams as the link that will be provided to you is called, to share all of the assessment documentation that is not shared with the customer. So anything on the EPA Pro, like the feedback form, is on EPA Pro, but all of the assessment documentation will be on SharePoint Teams, including GoToMeeting links from interviews.
And sound cues to put in now.
Okay. Just wondering if it's worthwhile me getting closer. Sorry, Kelly. Kelly's just said the sound keeps dipping in and out. So I'm going to just do a bit of reorganisation. I might swap places here in the room and come over to there. Can I switch places with you? Oh, very high tech.
We need to amplify.
Absolutely. This is really high tech. I'm just going to get closer to the screen. That's the answer. Right, Kelly, does that make a difference? Any better, Kelly? Great. Okay, so you see, being closer to the microphone does make a difference. That's what we've all learned today. Right, where was I? So, as I was saying, all of the assessment documentation, so everything associated with the assessment, that is the assessment forms, the GoToMeeting links from interviews, observation forms, feedback, everything is saved on SharePoint so that we have a single source of information. Some of that information is also put onto EPA Pro, and that's fundamentally the information that we share with the customer. That team site will allow the IEPAs to share information with the LIEPA, and it will also allow the associate manager and any other stakeholder that needs to review that assessor evidence access so that they can review any of the assessment documentation. Now, this is currently in place for beta, and when I did the training last week, we spoke about this. We know this needs to evolve. And the initial feedback from the technology team that is supporting with this is that the company that we're working with is already looking at a solution to ensure that the documentation will be in one place rather than two. So we're starting beta with this, but this will evolve as we move through beta. So we're expecting a reasonably rapid change to this, but for the moment, that's where we are. Any questions at this point? Okay. Now, I've added this in here, and whenever we talk about GDPR, it's sometimes people want to go to sleep, but it is important for us to underline this. The reason that we've chosen to use SharePoint and Teams for the sharing of information is fundamentally to do with our GDPR obligations. City and Guilds, as the organisation responsible for processing personal data, and by personal data I mean, you know, the video or the audio links to the apprentices' interviews. It could be information about what they've got in their assessment. It could be information relating to their name. So that personal data is our responsibility to be, we have to be responsible for that, and we have to be compliant to the GDPR principles that are set out. Now the principles are there, and I'll talk to those a little bit later, because based on that, you know, we've made a decision to use SharePoint and Teams to pass the assessor documentation back and forth. And we've also wrapped some key guidelines for our assessors, our IEPAs and our LIEPAs, about how they manage any information that they download to their local machines. I just wanted to show you that. The reason that we've chosen to do things in this way is really to do with our GDPR obligations. And the obligations to make sure that we retain the right data, it's for the right purpose, it's transparent, it's accurate, and there's a limitation and integrity wrapped around the storage of that personal data. I just wanted to flag that. I think it's important to give you the context as to why we've chosen to operate in this way. Any questions at this point? Right, okay, so you've already seen this, but I just wanted to go through this again, and it talks a little bit to which system you will use to do the review. So as we've already said, the EPA events team, the process starts, and for many different standards, there could be different types of assessment material. But let's imagine there is a professional discussion, and that would involve a go-to-meeting link. Now, currently, as the process will work, the EPA events booking team will set up the go-to-meeting event for the IEPA and for the apprentice. And once that event is completed, they will send that go-to-meeting link to the assessor in a secure document. And when I say a secure document, I mean a password-protected document. That's slightly different to the process that we currently use, but for this project, that's how it will work because of those GDPR regulations that we have to conform with. Using that go-to-meeting link, and any other assessor forms that the IEPA prepares, the IEPA will review all of the information, and they may complete fail feedback, and they will then put the results on EPA Pro, any fail feedback on EPA Pro, and any of the other information, so the assessor forms, the go-to-meeting link will be saved on SharePoint. Now, because it's saved on SharePoint, the LIEPA will then receive an auto notification that new materials have been uploaded to SharePoint. But the LIEPA will also see in EPA Pro that there is work to quality assure in their workflow. And that's how it will work for you. And when you see in EPA Pro there is work to quality assure, then it's a case of going into EPA Pro to identify the apprentice, to pinpoint the results, and then going into SharePoint to search the materials that will give you the information to be able to quality assure that assessment. Any questions at that point? Okay, there's a hand up. Hi, Sean.
Hi, it's just a quick question. I've had a couple of issues this week where the witness testimonies for our standard, the adult care and the lead adult care, are not as required. So currently, the IEPA speaks to me, I agree or disagree with what they're saying, and then they go back to the EPA team, who then goes back to the customer to ask for the correct documents from the customer. So what will happen with the new system?
I think we spoke about this a lot. I'm just going to feedback on me. Sorry, I'm just going to leave you again because just for the noise. Okay, so we talked about this last time, and I think if there's an easy fix to it, and it's easy for the IEPA to resolve the issue. So if a document is missing, for example, and the IEPA has a contact, it might be easy for them to contact that person to say, this is missing, I need it to be able to carry out an assessment. If there's a particular issue and it involves more than that, it's a case of escalating that to the EPA events booking team, and then they will pick up that conversation with the customer. So I think it really does depend on what the issue is. If something's missing and it's a quick chasing now, so you know, we've set the date for the assessment, I haven't got the witness testimony, please can you send it through? I think that's a simple fix. If what they've sent through isn't correct and there are some issues, or you've chased and they haven't come back to you, then I think that's an escalation to the EPA events booking team. Is that, oh, sorry, Sean, is that okay, Sean?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, and I think the one point on this one, so at the minute, if I'm right, and please correct me if I'm not, the witness testimony for the adult care, for example, is uploaded at Gateway and is provided to the IEPA. But in the new world, what will happen is when you set the dates for the planning meeting, the evidence upload and the date for the evidence upload will be agreed at that point. So if you set the date for the 20th of February, then part of the conversation is that the evidence has to be uploaded onto EPA Pro by this date. So that's a discussion that you'd have at the planning meeting. Any other questions? So we've said that the LIEPA, in order to do your work, your role, you'll receive an auto notification, but the key thing for you the key thing we'd like you to do is to engage with the EPA Pro platform regularly. And what you'll see on the EPA Pro platform is, and we'll show you this, for the IEPAs in your team, there will be a number of different pieces of work to quality assure. When you go into the platform and quality assure them and you look at the results, you will then enter onto SharePoint and you will find the relevant documents on SharePoint to carry out that quality assurance. As we've already said, if everything's correct, the LIEPA can release from EPA Pro at that point. If there are amends to be made, then the LIEPA would make contact with the IEPA off the platform. It's an offline discussion, and we've talked about that happening by email, and we've got some draft templates for that to encourage that conversation. But that's about contacting the IEPA to say, you know, there are amends to be made, these are the amends, can you do them within a certain time, and can you let me know when they've been actioned? As a result of that, the IEPA would action those changes. They would save the new version of the forms on SharePoint and EPA Pro, and on EPA Pro they would remove the first version of failed feedback if it's relevant and add the final version. So we talked about that last week, but that just gives you a bit more detail into the role of the LIEPA in this process. A couple of key points to remember. The component result needs to be signed off by the LIEPA before the IEPA can finalise the overall result. So if you think about it, in the new world, we're saying that each component result is finalised by the IEPA and it's signed off by the LIEPA. Once all of the individual component results have been quality assured and approved by the LIEPA and released by the LIEPA, then the IEPA can derive the overall result for the EPA, and the LIEPA can quality assure that. So I think this is one of the things we spoke about last week. We've clarified that the IEPA needs to do all of the component results. They need to be finalised before the IEPA can do the overall results. Just wanted to clarify that because that was a point that was raised last week, and we now have an answer to that. Okay, I'm going to pause. Any more questions? Good. Okay. Right. So just wanted to show you, I talked about the LIEPA making contact with the IEPA. So if there are issues that need to be amended, we are going to provide you with a mini bank of sort of template emails that you can use to contact your IEPA to say, you know, you've reviewed, and in this case, the apprentice feedback form, and before it's to be signed off, it needs to have these changes. And that is an email template that you can use to facilitate that contact back and forth between the IEPA. And we've got a couple of those that are already drafted, and we'll provide those in the support materials for you to use with your IEPAs. Okay, now another thing I wanted to underline, and again this builds on what we spoke about last time, the SLAs for completing. Sammy, you already asked me, is there a kind of expectation about timescales? As we've said, from when the IEPA accepts the allocation to getting the planning meeting to take place, we've got an expectation of no more than 10 days. We'd like it to happen as soon as possible within that window of 10 working days. Thank you, Bill. 10 working days, but that is the expectation we've set for that planning meeting to take place. In terms of carrying out the assessment, this is the point that I've just raised. So the IEPA would carry out for each component, for each assessment method, the IEPA would carry out the assessment, 3 days for them to complete all of their work, and the LIEPA would have 3 days to sign it off and to get the results out. And that is for all of the assessment components. So it could be that all of these things happen very quickly. But as I've just said, the IEPA can't generate an overall result for the endpoint assessment until all of these assessment methods, these assessment components, have been signed off by the LIEPA. So from the last day, from the last assessment, if you can imagine, the IEPA would carry out the assessment, the LIEPA would sign it off, the result for that component would go out. Then the IEPA can generate the overall result, which has to be signed off, and the results go out. So originally, I think we thought there would be 6 days from the last component being completed to the results going out, but actually this could be up to 12 days because obviously for the overall result, we'll need this process to happen again. So what we'd encourage you to do is to try and sign and quality assure things as rapidly as you can, which we know you do, so that we can try and get these results out to customers as soon as possible and to try and shorten that timeline where possible. Any questions at this point? Questions in the room? I'm going to take that. Oh, there is a question. You love that slide. God, you love that slide, Mandy. It's always nice when we get a compliment. Okay. So what we'd like to do now is repeat a little bit of what we've already seen. I'm going to need to change the presenter. Jane, you're going to need to add Libby as an organizer. Okay, sorry, we just need to, our super user Libby is on the line. I'm going to take Libby off mute.
Do you want her to organise that?
Yes, please. Hi, Libby.
Hiya.
Hi, we're just going to make you,
Yeah, she's down.
we're just going to make you organizer, and I'm going to, when we get to the point that we need to, I'll change presenter and give you control. Is that all right?
That's
okay.
fine.
Fine, okay. I'll keep you off mute. She's there. Where's she gone? Right. Okay. So we've shown you EPA Pro already, but what I'd like to do now is I'd like to focus a little bit on EPA Pro from your perspective, from the LIEPA's perspective. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through at first the landing page and what it looks like for you. Remember, as a LIEPA, you have the same login and you will have access to do your IEPA work and your LIEPA work from the same login. There's one thing I wanted, before we show you this, there's one thing I wanted to underline. Now, as we go through the presentation, I think what I need to underline is that at this point in beta, on EPA Pro, we don't currently have all the required tools for the LIEPA to manage and prioritize and plan their work in the way that we'd like. We've said it's beta, it's a kind of pilot, it's small scale, so we think we can manage it through beta, but we are going to have to wrap some additional tools around the process for LIEPAs to help you manage your workload and set the priority of the things that you have to do. So I'll talk through those today, but please, as we look through the system, please bear in mind this is a work in progress for us, and part of what we're doing in beta is getting to understand, what the requirements are, what do we need to focus on. So your feedback and your questions through beta and through the training will be really helpful. So please feel free to give that feedback and ask questions as you like. Okay, so Libby, I'm going to make you presenter. So can you just talk us through the login for the LIEPAs? Let's get into a LIEPA page and we'll just can just review the kind of landing page. And so you can talk them through what this.
Okie dokie. So firstly you see the landing page, Rachel?
I can, yes.
Fantastic, that's a good start. So as a LIEPA, as you will see in front of you, this is your landing page or your dashboard. I think it's important just to point out that each dashboard or landing page, whichever one you want to call it, mirrors each other. So for yourselves as LIEPAs, the IEPA dashboard will be very, very similar. The only options that you will have where an IEPA won't is obviously the quality assurance tab and the certification. So let's get started. So landing page. So as you can see here, you've got a nice little calendar here. And to the right hand side, you have your, which will state your name. If you click onto that little drop down there, you will see an option to select or edit your profile. Now, it's really important at this stage, just for beta, that if there's any changes that you require, name change or anything like that, you come through to the support email address and we will change that for you. But for this instance, what I'm going to show you is that as you go through the process of quality assuring your IEPA work, there's certain stages where you have to input your name and your signature. But with EPA Pro, if you set your signature at the very beginning, it will default all the time. So it's a process you don't have to keep manually doing. And it's quite a simple process. I'll just clear here. In the signature box here, by using your, I would suggest a mouse is probably the easiest. You can do a little squiggle, here's one I made earlier, and just select update my profile. So that is in effect what's going to do. As you will see as we go through the process, there'll be certain checkpoints where you will have to stop and enter your name and signature. But by doing this at the very beginning, you will actually, it'll be defaulted to yourself. So also to the right of you here, you will see a little icon and it's a bell. If you click on this bell, you will see a list of all your notifications. So the notifications will, as you can see, here's one I made earlier. An apprentice has completed their gateway. You will also see notifications that will state that results are waiting for you from your IEPA, from the IEPAs, and also about any planning meetings that have been booked as well. To the left-hand side, you will see a menu tab. So I'll just go through these quickly, but we'll go through them in more detail as we go on this afternoon. So by clicking, sorry?
The sound is breaking up a little bit, just to make you aware of that.
All right, okay. Just move it close to my mic.
The technical way.
Yeah. So here you'll have the caseload, the user management tab, an apprentice tab, a gateway review tab, an assessment tab, where ultimately this is where the bulk of your work will be under this tab, and a support materials tab as well. But as I say, we'll go through the tabs in more detail throughout the afternoon when we go through the process step by step. So is there any questions at the moment at this point?
Okay. Maybe what I wanted to do now was to show them when we go in as a LIEPA. So one thing to underline that I need to underline to everybody is currently on the system, as a LIEPA, you will be able to see the work of all the IEPAs in that particular team for that particular standard. So there currently isn't a mechanism for allocating you a set of IEPAs. So you know, as part of the work that we'll need, you will need to know which IEPAs you are managing, which I'm assuming you do know, but I just wanted to make that clear. Currently, we don't have a mechanism for dividing, you know, for allocating certain IEPAs to a LIEPA. So you will see all of the IEPAs work for that particular standard. Libby, can we go to, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to show them as a LIEPA, when they look to see the work that they need to quality assure, is that landing page of the different IEPAs and what they would see. So can you show them that?
I certainly can. So again, to your left-hand side, you will select the assessment tab and select the QA. And then it will crash. No, it won't. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to quickly log out. So this is what you'll see to your left hand side under the assessment tab, and you're going to select the QA tab. And this will then display a landing page of all IEPAs here. Under the EPA name, it will say IEPA name, and down to the number of items for QA. So that's the components that you've got, apprentices, shall I say, that are waiting to be QA'd. Now we do have a filter here. So if it is that you are customer service LIEPA, you can select, and it will just list those IEPAs that have actually got work process through for under that standard.
That's great, excellent. Just to underline, which Libby said last time, it says EPA name there. That's the name it's given on the system. That means IEPA. To us, that's IEPA in our language. And then the number of items to QA, this refers to either the number of assessment components to sign off or the overall result. So for Mr. Master Data Services, who's a very well-known business admin, IEPA, we really need to come up with some new names here, Libby, I think. We've got one item of his to QA. For Frank Farmer, who's more of a land IEPA, should we say, we've got 3 to quality assure. Now, as I've already said, in terms of the tools on the platform to be able to manage the work that you do as IEPA and to prioritise that, this is a very simple interface, and it doesn't really give you as much information as we'd like to help you do that. But if you just put that to one side for a moment, because I'll talk you through the tools that we're going to give you to help. But I just wanted to show you what it currently looks like as a LIEPA when you log on and you look at the quality assurance work that you have to do. So are there any questions at this point? Okay. So Libby, as we're here, while we're here, what will be useful to repeat for everybody is to do a quality assurance of a component and then to do a quality assurance of an overall result. Can you talk us through?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So again, under the EPA name, again, as Rachel said, it will be the IEPA name. I'm going to select IEPA LIEPA A. So I'm going to go along to the little red pencil at the end here and click on it. And then this will display all the apprentices that have been resulted by that particular IEPA. So here we've got apprentice 18, apprentice 23 and apprentice 29. So for this instance, I'm going to select apprentice 18. And as you can see here on the colour chart, it's like an amber orangey colour. So that means that no quality assurance has gone through for this particular apprentice. So here you will see that the status is pending QA. And as a LIEPA, what we're going to do is just go through a quality assurance of that particular component. So we'll pick the practical observation here. You can see the status is pending QA. So I'm ready now to QA as a LIEPA, this assessment component, and I'll select the View Assessment Info. By clicking this, you will have here the attachments, and it will give you the option that states View. By clicking on the View option, you will be able to download this and view any evidence that the apprentice has uploaded. What we want to do next is to see the result that the IEPA has given this assessment component. And we do this by clicking on the View Result tab next. We can see that that particular IEPA has given this assessment component a pass. Click into the next page, and we will just go through. So as a LIEPA, if I'm happy with that result and I'm going to QA the result as a pass, I simply go to the QA Result tab.
Can I just say at one point, well, as I've already said, you would be looking at the information on EPA Pro. You'd also be using SharePoint to look at the information there, because some of the information that's relevant to the assessor would be stored on SharePoint. Sorry,
Now that's absolutely fine. So if I just go back, so we're going to click the QA result tab, and then it will display this page here. It'll say QA evidence and comments. I'm happy as a LEPA that it's going to be a pass result, so I'm just going to put in QA. No upload is required, so I'll select the next tab, and then you get the declaration page. So this is what I was on about earlier, when you actually get your access to EPA Pro by setting up your signature. Once you've done that, this will automatically be populated in here. At the bottom, it will say publish result. Just by ticking that circle there, it will go green. And then at the bottom right, it will give you the option to submit QA and publish that result for that assessment component. There we go. And as you can see now on the colour chart, that we now have a green entry to say that that particular assessment component, the practical observation, has now been quality assured and it is now a pass.
Maybe we've got a question in the room.
So at what point, Libby, when you've clicked on the tab View Assessment Info, at what point then would you go on to SharePoint?
Well, you could do it, I mean, the assessment information, what might be on there. So if you can, so that's a question I was going to ask actually. So Libby, in terms of the fail feedback, is that under View Result? Or is that
Sorry, can you say that again, Rachel? Sorry.
In terms of fail feedback, that you could also find that on View Result.
Yes, you can, yes.
So in terms of the overall, what they would do is they would look at the assessment information. And for the practical observation form, there probably isn't anything there because the provider doesn't have to upload evidence for the practical observation. So the only evidence that the IEPA would need to look at is on SharePoint. Yeah. If they wanted to look at fail feedback, they could also find that on SharePoint actually. That's fine, it's all in one place. It might be easier for the LIPA to go into SharePoint because everything will be on SharePoint. But they could also find the fail feedback on EPA Pro. They'd need to look at the results on here. So it really depends on the assessment method we're talking about. The showcase portfolio, for example, there would be stuff to look at because the customer's evidence would be there. For adult care, you might have the witness testimony somewhere. So it really depends on the assessment method we're talking about. Is that clear?
Yeah. So in an ideal world, you could click on View Assessment Info and see a link into SharePoint.
It's not a link into SharePoint.
But it's not. So it's not at this point.
No. So they'd have to go into SharePoint.
It's a separate thing.
Okay, separately. Ideally, as I've said, and this is the way that we envisage the portal and platform will evolve, is that we won't need to go into SharePoint. There will be a place on EPA Pro for those assessment documents to be stored. So there's no need to shift from one system to another. It's all in the same place. The reason we can't currently do that is EPA Pro, if we put documents on there at this point, it's shared with the customer. And those assessor forms are not to be shared with the customer. Does that make sense? Yeah. I've got a couple of questions.
If all the documents are going on SharePoint at the moment, including the failed feedback, is there any real need to use that View Result tab? Can we not just use that result pass there?
You could do. I think if for example, it's more efficient for you to just go into SharePoint and look at all the documents, that's fine. The reason we're putting the failed feedback on the platform and the reason the LIPA would need to look at it is just to make sure it's the same as the one in SharePoint, because the one on EPA Pro is the one that goes out to the customer. So I think it's better for the LIPA to get in the habit of looking at any relevant failed feedback on EPA Pro. Okay, I've got a question, I've got hands. Let's have a look. Hi, Veronica. Hello, Veronica.
Oh, hi there. I did type my question as well because I wasn't sure whether.
Right.
Okay, don't worry. I'll say it out loud, shall I, while I'm on?
Yeah, please.
My question was, if LIPA requires the IEPA to make amendments to their documentation after they've carried out a sample or verifying it, is there an option for the LIPA to refer back that component back to the IEPA on the EPA Pro? And is that audit trail of referral back and the reasons kept anywhere?
Okay, so currently No, there isn't, Veronica, and that is something, you know, ideally what you would like is the ability to say no and for it to be referred back on the system. Currently, it's the absence of approval that means that result hasn't gone out. So the result can't go out until the LIEPA approves it. So the way the process will work at this early stage is that there'll be an offline conversation, and that's why we've provided an email template. So that if any amends had to be made, that's how we go back to the IEPA. Going forward, absolutely, that should be a requirement because it would make it much easier if the platform could be used to do that.
Yes, I was just thinking in terms of, so it would require us to keep some sort of audit trail or record of that process for the IEPA, especially I'm just thinking if they're new and they require a lot of support, that we compile our LIEPA sampling reports to them on their performance, including action improvements. And currently we kind of take that from the audit trail that's created on the contact diary within the learning assistant. So would you recommend that we find some mechanism or strategy as a team to record our interim comments and things and issues and trends that we're finding with that particular IEPA elsewhere until we've got some sort of way of doing that?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm going to pick that up with the associate managers and Jane once we finish the webinar. I think initially, as I said, initially the scale we were very, very small. We've got one, which is great. I'm not quite sure when we'll get our second one, but I do think that is a conversation that's worthwhile having offline. So can you leave that one with us, Veronica? And we might come back to you for just some suggestions as to how best to manage it, what would work best for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, get back on me, Veronica. Any other questions at this point? Okay, so we can. Any other questions in the room? No? Okay, bear with me a second. Right, okay, Libby, do you want to, so we've done a QA of, let's do another one. Should we do another one? Let's do another one.
Okay, so for Apprentice 18, we will look at the showcase portfolio. And for this instance, you can see that there's already a one previous fail comment that's been added into the notes section. So for this, we know that the showcase portfolio has previously come through. It has been resolved by the IEPA, but it came through as a fail. They have resubmitted and come through pro again. So we're going to QA this result again by selecting the view assessment info. We've got one here now. Obviously, any evidence or anything like that will be named correctly. And then you can view the documentation, which will download. I'll just show you. She says it will download onto your desktop. Okay. So now we are going to view the result that the IEPA has graded this apprentice for this assessment component. Just for comments, it's if this was a fail again from the IEPA, the fail feedback form would be displayed underneath here, which you'd be able to view. But for this instance now, the IEPA has graded this apprentice a pass on this assessment component. By clicking the tabs along, there's no action for you to do here. But should it have failed, there will be a comment in the box here for next action. And that will be that it would possibly be a retake. Go along to next again. It's already set up with your the IEPA signature. So now I'm going to QA the result for the showcase portfolio. Just to select QA. I'm happy with everything. And again, your details will automatically be in here. You publish the result.
Good question with that. So assuming that you've set up your signature, when you write your name in here, the signature will appear.
So as soon as you've set up within your edit profile, you won't even have to enter your name. Your name and signature will automatically be set within your account on Pro. So ultimately what you should be doing is just publishing the result because your details will be set here. Once they've gone green and you're happy, you submit QA and publish that result.
Brilliant, thanks Libby. Can we do an overall result now?
Absolutely, yes, we can. So here's one I made earlier. I'm just going to come out. So an overall result. Just going to go back.
I've got a couple of questions. Sorry to pause. Louise, you've asked the question where Libby has put QA on the feedback form. So can we go back? Can you go back to that page, Libby, because it's useful to just look back at that. So where the LIEPA puts QA in the box, Louise asked, could we use this as a place to detail your feedback? In theory, yes. However, there is a problem with it in that that feedback doesn't go to the IEPA until after the result has been published, which means that it's not a very useful tool as a way of giving active feedback to the IEPA. So I think it is something that in theory should be a place for us to leave feedback, but currently it doesn't work that way. So that's why we're using the email option for the short term. And that's why I need to pick up the conversation with the associate managers and you as LIEPAs as to what works best in terms of tracking that QA information for an audit trail. Hopefully that answers your question, Louise. Kelly said, is there an option to carry out an interim verification for the IQA's initial assessment of the showcase, or is that first assessment only put on SharePoint? So I think what you're saying, Kelly, is it possible to look at the portfolio as a LIEPA before the result is finalised to you? I think that's what you're asking. And I'm not sure, I don't know the answer to that question. I can put Libby on the spot and ask her. So Libby, I'm assuming that as a LIEPA, you can't access the evidence until that result is ready to QA?
That's correct, yes.
So in answer to your question, currently, Kelly, you can only access that portfolio when the result comes to you for QA. Now, because the portfolio is evidence that the provider uploads, that isn't on SharePoint, that's only on EPA Pro. So I just wanted to, that might be an issue. So let's take a note of that. But as far as we understand it, the LIEPA can only see that information once it's ready to QA. I'm just going to bring you off mute, Kelly. Give me a minute.
So if you wanted to have a discussion about that particular assessment,
Hi.
you couldn't do that because the LIEPA can't see it.
Well, you can only do it once the provisional result is in. I think so. And what I think we need to do with Libby is we need to test that out. Kelly, I've taken you off mute because I think it's an interesting question that you raised. I think Alison's picked up on that.
Hi, yeah, currently the IEPA will do the initial showcase assessment to plan their questions to carry out on the EPA date, which as LIEPAs we verify to ensure that they've identified all the right questions, etc. for the day. So if we can't see the evidence, we obviously can't provide that initial verification on that showcase unless it's uploaded onto this system. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what we don't know, Kelly, is whether you, as a LIEPA, whether you'll be able to see that evidence until the IEPA's put a provisional result in for it and sent it to you for QA. Now we need to test that out. So can you leave that one with us?
Sure, yeah.
In terms of answering your question, we'll need to have a mechanism for the LIEPA to see the portfolios before any result is finalised. In fact, sometimes before the assessment takes place. Is that right?
Yes, because yeah, the IEPA needs to carry out that first assessment of that showcase portfolio before they go out. So we need to verify that before they go out, and then obviously they can't upload their final assessment grade until they've been out on the day.
And in terms of being able to verify that, you need to see the portfolio.
We need to see the evidence, yeah.
That's great. That's really helpful, Kelly. Can you leave that one with us? Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the next question, this would mean there would be at least, yeah. So Louise, I think Louise has picked up on the feedback. So can we look at that feedback field, Libby, is that possible?
Yeah, so where that would be uploaded from the IEPA, yeah?
Yeah, so where the IEPA is quality assuring the results, there is a feedback field where they have to put in quality assurance.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, and can you just show people that field again to remind them?
Yeah.
How we get to it?
Okay, so that is in the view results. So the failed feedback form will be underneath here.
Yeah.
It will state name, it will say failed feedback form, and you can see that there's an upload. You'll be able to view that, and again that will download, and you'll be able to view the documentation that the IEPA has provided regarding that failed feedback.
If they want to QA the results, so they could just QA that result as a pass.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I've got the police driving through Burntwood at the moment.
At this point, so can we just pause there? So when Louise mentions that there is, sorry, Libby, can we go back? So when it comes time to QA the results, there is a QA evidence and comments here. And what we ask you to do in order to be able to sort of finalise, we've asked you to put QA in here. Louise asked whether we could use that box as a way of an audit trail for comments. We can use it in that QA email sent, or just to give a detail of what instructions were sent. But these evidence and these comments don't go to the IEPA until the result has been finalised. So it's not a useful mechanism for a conversation with the IEPA to go back and forth about what needs to be done. So it can be used to log that quality assurance has taken place, and we need to. I will pick up with the associate managers about how we use that, but it isn't a tool that we can use to log a conversation between the IEPA and the LIEPA about what needs to change. I just wanted to show you that. Does that answer your question, Louise? If it doesn't, please raise your hand. Okay. Good. Can we, so Libby, where did we get to? Can we QA the overall result now?
Yep, certainly. So to QA an overall result, you would use your certification tab, which is on your left. And again, it's a very similar dashboard that you will see the apprentices that I've either had full certification gone through or are currently awaiting. In the tab up here, it will say in progress. If you click on that and enter the filter by status option, it will list all apprentices for you. So if it is that you are looking for a particular apprentice and you can't find them, just be mindful of this filter here. So to certificate for a full apprentice, I've got one I made earlier, apprentice 18. So by clicking on this, we can say that we can clearly see that the showcase portfolio has been completed as a pass, and the practical observation has been completed and passed. What we will do is then at the bottom, we will see that the professional discussion is pending QA. So if we wanted to process these two components, we would certify apprentice by clicking at the red option above. So for these two components, it will give you a breakdown at the bottom that we are saying that these showcase portfolio and the practical observation are a pass. But the professional discussion is actually waiting QA. Right, so can you just bear with me 2 seconds? I need to make sure that goes green, sorry.
Sorry. You might have to go back into QA, Libby. Okay, so now
And here we go. So again, apologies for that. So again, the filter tab is still in progress. We're going to change that to filter by status. We're going to come down and find our apprentice. And we can now see that all components have been passed and have been QA'd. Once we're happy, you can select the Certify Apprentice tab, which is highlighted in red at the top. Now, by selecting that, you will see that all assessment components here have resulted as a pass. And you've got an overall outcome tab here. By selecting that, it will give you a drop down of the overall grades that you can select. I'm going to select pass. And then at the top here, you'll see 5 tabs, and this is the 5 stages that you will have to go through. So I've selected the overall outcome as a pass. I will select next. We will not be entering any information on here. On this tab, it will say confirm employer. So all you're doing is just checking the details of the employer. Once I'm happy, I will tick the box at the bottom and select next. Similar page, but we're confirming the apprentice details at this point. Once I'm happy, I will select confirm apprentice details and select next. And then the declaration at the end, as previously mentioned, your details will be automatically entered here. And once I'm happy, sorry, Rachel.
Your signature changes every time.
That's why it's best to make sure you've defaulted it at the beginning. And select submit. There you go.
Okay, we're going to pause there. Questions in the room?
Just at the stage 1, where there was with pop-up, it actually gave you the option to upload a document which you passed by. Would there ever be a reason why you would upload a document there, and why is that there if it isn't?
Well, remember this is an out-of-the-box system at this point, so different people in the market are using it and using it in a slightly different way. So some of the things on here we don't use. In fact, if you notice, Libby's skipped through a number of screens. So I can't think of a reason to share at that point, because that point is probably going to be shared with the customer. But part of what we're doing at Beta is learning how it works and understanding what mechanisms we do want to use and how we want it to evolve. I think that's just something we'll take into our thinking.
Yeah.
You know, if there needed to be a document that's sent to the customer at that point, we've got functionality to do it. What we also need is functionality to manage, you know, some other things, which
I was just thinking about mistakes that could happen.
Yeah,
Some
absolutely.
IEPA might think, oh, I've got to upload something here.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And what we said, we've spoken about this, so as well as the decks that we will give you once they've all been finalised, Libby is working on a series of bite-sized videos that will talk you through the steps that you have to go through for each of the things. So quality assuring a component, this is how it's done, and it's a step-by-step guide, and it will be bite-sized. So it'll, you know, play for a minute, it'll give you the insight, and it'll tell you how to do something. And I think that will be useful, because there are things on here that we won't be using, and it's important that people understand that. So it's a good point. Any other questions at this point? Okay, Libby, is there anything else from you that? Oh, we've got a question. Kelly said, you mentioned before about GDPR. How do I feel about the IEPA emailing evidence to the LIEPA for advice? In the event the LIEPA cannot view the evidence on the system. Right, okay, so I'm just going to answer with respect to EPA Pro, because I know sometimes things happen in the real world which I probably don't want to hear about. I'll answer seriously. So in terms of this project, we've been very specifically given instruction that we absolutely shouldn't be doing things like emailing evidence between IEPA and LIEPA. And actually, we shouldn't be doing that generally as good practice, because something can go wrong. Emails are often, you know, they're hacked, they are at risk, there could be sensitive information there, so we need to be really mindful about how we do that. And specifically, there is specific scrutiny around this project currently, And so that's why we're using SharePoint. And SharePoint is our mechanism for sharing information with the LIPA that we need them to see, and not emailing it, because it is a secure site. As an IEPA, you can upload things onto there, the LIPA can view it, but there's no risk that something has gone into your inbox or somebody's hacked it and that information is then lost and passed on. So that's why I said this at the beginning. That's one of the reasons, you know, we've decided to use SharePoint, because we shouldn't be emailing that information back and forth, because it's just not secure. And things like GoToMeeting links, you know, they're not secure to be shared by email. What I was going to say, Kelly, is Kelly's then just said, and she's beaten me to it, so the IEPA can download the evidence from EPA Pro and upload it to SharePoint for the IEPA to view. Now, one of the possibilities that I talked about having to speak to the associate manager about how we resolve that indeed could be the solution. But what I'd like to check is whether there's an easier way to do it on the system first. So please bear with me on that. We'll come to your answer eventually, and that is a possibility, but there might be an easy way of doing it. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to pause there. Right, okay, so I'm going to ask for control back, Libby. I'm going to give it to myself. Thanks ever so much, Libby, that's really helpful. Okay, so on the deck, we've got the different landing pages, which we've spoken about, and we've talked about the different things that you will see. And we've also shown you, as the LIPA workflow, for the components that you are quality assuring. When you go into your QA field, this is what you will see. You will see a number of IEPAs with an amount of work to do, and you click on the red pen for that to happen. Now, as I've already said, this is all well and good, and at beta, we're expecting very low volume. So what you will see here will probably be in the 1s and 2s. And we'd encourage you to engage with EPA Pro very regularly so that you're able to clear your quality assurance work when it comes up. However, when this starts to be larger, as we work through March and as the beta proceeds, you might get larger numbers here. And one of the problems that we've identified is that actually, how do you know where to go first? How do you know which work to quality assure first? And that is an issue. So currently, we've got a mechanism for to support you with that, which is through a report. Now, I need to just click through these are the screens that I wanted to show you, that Libby's already shown you. But what I wanted specifically to say to you is, in order to manage that workflow, what we will do is we aim in the short term to give you access to a report that will help you do that. Now, that report will be provided to you through SharePoint, and it will be accessible for all of you. And I will talk you through it, but I just wanted to show you what that report will look like. Okay, so just to go through some of the points. So as with the current process, you as a LIPA will need to sign off results. We've already said that EPA Pro has limited tools to help you prioritize and plan your work. Now, that is really not a problem at the beginning of beta, because there'll be very little volume in there. And we envisage you'll go in, you'll engage in the platform, you'll see 1s and 2s, and you can quality assure those things. And at lower volumes, we'd encourage you to engage with that system regularly to manage that. But where high volume starts to kick in beta, we needed a different mechanism. So we've got 2 reports that we'll provide you with, and we've tried to make this as simple as possible, because I do appreciate there's a lot of change here, and this is one other thing that you need to get your heads around. So there are 2 reports. Now, the first report is called the Workflow Priority Report, and that really is a snappy title. And the second one is called the Assessment Elements Report. Now, the first one will provide you with some additional information on how to prioritize your quality assurance work that needs to be done. I'll show you examples of both of these in a minute. And the Assessment Elements Report will provide you information on what assessment activity is being planned by your IEPAs, so it will support you with planning your quality assurance and sampling strategy. Any questions Or do you want to wait until I show you the reports? Let's wait. Okay, right. So, okay, scary screen, but let's just pause a minute and look at what we can see. So the report that you'll be given access to will be relatively simple to look at. What you can see is you can see an IEPA name and you can see a standard. So you as a LIEPA will have a number of different IEPAs that you're working with, and you'll have a number of different standards that you're working with. So if you're working across customer service and business administration, you'll have an option here, for example, to select business admin or customer service, or actually to select both of them at the same time, so you can see all of the work. And what this report shows you is these are all the different components for each of the standards. There's the component number, tells you what it is, and these are all the different apprentices. Not worried about that. What it tells you is that this is the date when that came into your workflow to quality assure. So I know if I'm working on this, this is the piece of work, this is the area that I need to start on. As I've said, at low volume, it's not a problem, because if you've got one or two every couple of days, you'll just clear them. But if there's more information in here, you can see that, you know, if you're looking at apprentice given family, interesting name, that work has only just come into your workflow, whereas apprentice 6 came into your workflow earlier in the month. And so it gives you the focus on the dates to be able to show where you need to put your attention. I'm going to pause there because there's quite a lot of information. I will show you those reports and I'll talk through, I'll show you them live, so I'll talk through how you filter. Any questions?
You'll probably answer it anyway, but if there's more than one LIEPA working on the community, will they be able to segregate the apprentices that only align to them?
Yeah, so what they can do, Bill, is they can select the IEPA names that are relevant to them. So you can go into that field, it'll contain all of the IEPAs that are relevant to your standards, right, and you can take out the ones that are not relevant to you, that you don't need to be looking at. So it will do that. Any other questions at this point?
And is it update? How often is it updated?
Daily.
So you'll see every single day from
yes,
from the first entry.
Well, you'd hope for if you are going in regularly and engaging with it and clearing the work, there won't be anything here. You might see a couple of days. If you've been off for a week or you've been backed up a little bit, you might see more days here. But as they clear, what this is showing you, and they jump off. Yeah. Okay. Because this will show you everything that is in progress. So once it's been quality assured, in theory, it should drop off and you shouldn't see it. Any other questions at this point? Okay, we'll move on then. So this is the snappy title of the workflow priority report. The second report is the assessment elements. It looks very similar. What we envisage this will do is to support your sampling strategy. So it looks very similar. It's actually a different tab on the same report. But what you would need to do is you would select everything that's in progress. You would select a particular IEPA name that you want to focus a sampling strategy for. So if we imagine that Frank Farmer is red rated, he's new to the pool, and I want to get an understanding of what assessments he's got in his diary, I would select in progress, because it's in progress, as Frank Farmer, that's the IEPA, and the standard that he's relevant to. And then what that would show me is for all the different apprentices and for all the different assessment methods, when he has assessments planned in. So these dates show you the dates of all the assessment activities. So I know that Frank has a showcase portfolio assessment that he's doing, or a practical observation that he's doing on the 30th of the 1st for that apprentice there, and he's got one later. So it gives you a real snapshot of their assessment activity, so that will help you plan your sampling activity. And the sampling activity, that is a potential sampling form, which I'll come back to in a minute. Okay, I'm going to pause there. There's a lot of information, I appreciate, but you know, the the rationale for doing this is that at low volume, we don't envisage managing the work on and the priority of the work on the portal is going to be a problem. If you have 1s and 2s, it's not a problem. As it starts to creep up between 7 and 8, you may want to use this report to help you understand the priority of your workload and to plan your sampling. Hi, Veronica.
Oh, hi again. Sorry, I just wanted to check something. These dates that are set at the top of this report, are they affected by, and do they rely on the accuracy of the IEPA putting in the right dates when they initially set the meetings and the dates? So if they change an EPA date or anything, does it rely, this report, the accuracy of it rely on the IEPA putting in the dates correctly for any changes?
Yeah, it absolutely does, because all of this data is taken from EPA Pro. What I would say, Veronica, is that if the IEPA is changing dates with the provider, they need to be updated on EPA Pro, because those dates, set by the planning meeting or subsequent planning conversations, they drive everything that happens on the portal. So if, for example, they've set the date of the 30th of January for this particular apprentice to do a practical observation, but they've had a conversation separately with the provider to change that to the 18th, then that's a conversation we need to have with the IEPA, because they absolutely need to update the platform with any changes. Because all of the notifications, and bear in mind with a practical observation, the date on the portal will drive the notifications for the provider, for the apprentice, to be at that practical observation. So if they've had a conversation and not updated it, then everybody's going to have the wrong information. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions at this point? Okay. And I'm just going to do one more slide before we move on. I did show you this form. This is a form that Rebecca has shared with me, and it was just to show you, and I don't think this has been confirmed yet, but what Rebecca's working on is a way of putting together a sampling form that allows you to capture your sampling strategy of what you're doing with each of your IEPAs, and the information in the reports here will help drive that. Now, there needs to be more work on that sampling form, but we did talk about that at the last session, so I just wanted to show you that we're currently working on it, and as that evolves, we will share that with you. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions before we take a break? Okay, good. I'm going to take a break for about 10 minutes. So can you come back for 3:10, please? Stretch your legs, have a cup of tea, and we'll meet back here in 10 minutes. Okay, right. There is a question. Hello. Sounds good. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so let's continue. I'm hoping we should motor through at this point. So we've just finished talking about the reports and the tools that you as an IEPA can use to help you manage workflow at larger numbers. As I've said, I think it's important to underline that while numbers are quite small or quite low, especially at the beginning of beta, what we'd encourage you to do as a LIEPA is to engage with EPA Pro regularly, so you can clear the workflow and the quality assurance to be done as regularly as you can, so you haven't got the issue that you're not quite sure which apprentice to query first. But the reports are there as a support tool. Now, those reports will be provided to you through SharePoint. Now, we've already spoken about SharePoint. You might hear me interchange SharePoint and Teams. SharePoint is the file storage mechanism. It's like a filing cabinet, and Teams is the kind of interface that you're using to access that. So please don't worry about those two terms. It's the same thing. So as I already said, you as a LIEPA will have access to SharePoint, and you'll be able to access your assessor documents, so anything that your IEPA has prepared in order to make a judgment, but you'll also have access to the reports on SharePoint too. Now, we'll be providing a video about how to access SharePoint, but I just wanted to talk you through the steps that you'll need to take, because some of you may have already received the link to set up a team site. You might have already received that in your email. So I just wanted to talk you through it today, so you'll be worried by that and you'll understand what you need to do to deal with it. So, as I've said, currently the documents that are shared on EPA Pro can be seen by the customer. So things like the fail feedback are on EPA Pro, and from there they're shared with the customer. Assessor forms, anything we don't share, go to meeting links for the professional discussion. You know, the assessor forms and the feedback forms are all to be put on SharePoint. Certain things that can't be shared with the customer will be on SharePoint, but we'll also save the feedback forms too on SharePoint. Now, the one thing I wanted to underline is that I've already said that the processes are evolving, and in the short term, we will be using SharePoint and EPA Pro, but the technology teams are already working on a solution to allow us to save our documents on EPA Pro only. So they're working on a technology solution that will allow us to save things so the customer can't see that information, and that is something that's currently being worked on. So we'd hope to see some progress on that in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, so this is very much a short-term solution. And as I've already said, SharePoint allows the safe storage of assessor documentation to avoid that back and forth via email of information, because we've said from a GDPR perspective that isn't safe. So, in its very basic form, I've included a pretty document here, but basically there are some very basic steps. So the IEPAs will have access to Teams, and the LIEPAs will have access to Teams. In its very basic form, the IEPA will need to save a document, so a document that's to be shared on SharePoint, it will need to be saved using a very specific file naming convention. So in order to make this work, there are very specific rules around the names that the IEPAs give to documents. Now, it's good to have some rules around that, because actually it's helpful if you know what document you're looking at before you open it. So we'll talk more about those conventions in a minute. But in terms of the assessor forms that they are producing for each assessment component, they would be asked to save those documents locally on their own files using a very specific file naming convention. They are then uploaded to the SharePoint site into an appropriate file. So there are files per standard, and the IEPA would upload the file from their local drive to the SharePoint site into the right standard folder. Oops, go back a bit, sorry. Once that happens, the LIEPA will be notified. They'll get an automatic notification that something's changed on Teams and that there are documents to review. And then the LIEPA can access that site, and they will see the documents within each apprentice folder. So there'll be a number of apprentice folders that they can access, and they will be able to go to the appropriate apprentice folder and access any of the documentation that they need to. So as we've said, everything will be saved on SharePoint. The failed feedback, the assessor documents, the go-to-meeting links will all be in one place, even if we also save some things on EPA Pro. So that's the basic process how it works. So the IEPA will name their document in a certain way, they will upload it to SharePoint, you'll get an automatic notification, and then you can access the appropriate folder for an apprentice within a standard to review that information. And then that can be used alongside EPA Pro to carry out your quality assurance.
Let's check, does that mean that each apprentice will have a unique folder?
Yes, each apprentice will have a unique folder. Okay. Any questions? Right, okay, so in terms of the file, I talked about a file naming convention. Now this is information that will need to go to the IEPA. So whenever the IEPA creates a document that they want to save in SharePoint, whether it's a failed feedback form, whether it's assessor forms, whether it's the go-to meeting link, they will need to save that document on their local PC with a very specific file naming convention. And that convention is the ENR number, which is our registration number, which usually goes 3 letters, 4 numbers. And then there is the complex number, so the sort of 6-digit number that relates to the standard is next. And it's really, really, really important that those things are correct. Okay? Because those things being correct will drive the file ending up in the right place. And then the IEPA will need to name the document in the way that it should be. So if it's assessor forms relevant to a showcase portfolio, then let's name it with the right name, so that you as a LIEPA will know what you're looking at before you actually open the document. I think that's really important, and we will underline that in the training to the IEPAs that they receive, and it'll be a recorded webinar to explain this to them. If it's a recit document, then we'd like you to add recit to it, because all of the documents that go in SharePoint, so if you can imagine, when the IEPA is doing the initial assessment, they will save all of the documents in SharePoint. If they need to make any amends, they will save the new documents in SharePoint, and there is a version control. So you as a LIEPA will be able to see what the original version was and what the second version was. And adding recit, you'll also be able to see what the recit version is as well. So that gives you the ability to look at the right information in the right way. And that is the file naming convention. And in terms of the IEPA training, that is the most important thing that they need to do. And we will be underlining that to them in the training. Any questions at this point?
Yeah, just to clarify, that convention will automatically save it in a particular place.
Yes.
So there is some logic in the system that will address that file to the right folder.
Exactly. So the way the SharePoint system works is that the IEPA will take this document that is saved on their computer, will go into SharePoint, into a standard, and save the document there. Once they've saved it, it's no longer visible to them. They have it saved locally, but they can't access it on SharePoint. But by naming it in that way, it's automatically picked up by the magic in the system, and it populates a folder that has the apprentice name or the apprentice ENR, so all the documents are saved in the right place. So when the LIEPA goes into SharePoint, they will see the standard and all of the apprentices within that standard, and the documents will be saved in those places. Now, there is a team through Beta who will be responsible for mopping up any mistakes, because I can guarantee that there could be instances where somebody gets the number wrong, or they might get it in the wrong order. And at that point, there is a team that is supporting that process to make sure it does go into the right place. Now, I'm expecting questions, and yes, here we go. Louise, you read my mind. So Louise says, what happens to the documents that are accidentally named incorrectly by the IEPAs? Of course, that's never going to happen. We know it's going to happen because obviously this will involve manual error. And as I just said, there is a team that will be supporting that mock-up. So they'll be monitoring this daily to make sure that things are in the right place. I hope that answers your question, Louise. If it doesn't, please come back to me. Any other questions? Hopefully that's Louise saying that worked. Okay. Kelly, you mentioned before there isn't currently the facility to allocate IEPAs to LIEPAs. Does this mean that all notifications when documents are uploaded are sent to all LIEPAs? It's a really good question, Kelly, and I need to find that out. I assume at this point, yes, but what I also assume is that there is a facility for you to turn that off. So the turning off of notifications, I think, you see, ideally, if I think about this logically, you as a LIEPA don't need to be informed that something is in SharePoint. The process that you would go through is you would look on EPA Pro, you would see what is there to quality assure. And if things are there to quality assure, you naturally assume the documents will be in SharePoint because the IEPA will need to have completed those in order to come to a result. So I think we need to look into ways of turning those notifications off, Kelly. So can you leave that one with me? and we'll get an answer to you on that about how we manage that. Because obviously as a LIEPA, you don't really want the notifications for all the other LIEPAs as well. At low volume, it's not a biggie, but at higher volume, that is irritating to say the least. So can you leave that one with me? Hopefully that answers your question, Kelly. Any other questions? Okay.
I've got a question. So if the IEPA uploads it to SharePoint, they then don't see it again.
They don't see it again. They can't, the IEPAs only have access to upload materials to SharePoint.
But then the LIEPA gets that.
So the LIEPA will get that access. There are some GDPR reasons for doing it that way. Let me just explain that. But that's the way that it needs to work.
However, that document still exists on the IEPA's local drive.
Yes, it does. So we've got some guidance at the end of the presentation about what we advise our IEPAs and LIEPAs to do with any information that they download onto their local drives on their PCs. Okay.
Because if there was a conversation that needed to be had about a particular piece of evidence, both LIEPA and IEPA would need to be referring to that.
And they will be looking at it, but the IEPA will be looking at it on their own PC, and the LIEPA will be looking at it on SharePoint. Yeah, so it stops having to share things by email, and it stops that risk. But there are administrative issues with it that we need to work through. Okay, I'm going to carry on, being mindful of time. So just to review, first the IEPA needs to save a document on their personal drive and check for errors, and that saving of that document needs to be done with that file naming convention. They access the appropriate folder, they upload the evidence, the IEPA will hopefully receive a notification, but not too many, and we'll look into that. The LIEPA can then access the information on SharePoint, and they can feed back to the IEPA if any changes are required. If changes are required, when the IEPA goes back into SharePoint and uploads a new version of the document, it's saved as version 2. So the LIEPAs can see which is version 1 and which is version 2, and if they need to, they can check that the changes they've requested have been made. Okay, I'm going to pause there. We've gone through that. Any questions?
So it is crucial that they hold documents on their own systems to allow that interaction to take place.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of whilst the assessment is taking place, they will need to hold those documents. The IEPAs will need to hold the documents on their local drives. However, once that assessment has been concluded, then we are giving advice to them as to what they do with those documents, because ideally, from a GDPR perspective, they need to be removed. So what I wanted to talk to you now, and you might very well have already received this. So as I've said, you as a LIEPA and IEPA will get access to SharePoint or through Microsoft Teams. So SharePoint, Microsoft Teams. I've said I'm going to interchange this use. And what you will do is, what will happen is, and you may have already received this, you will get an email invitation from this address here, and you will use that link to open Microsoft Teams. It's also given you the link here, so you can either go through the link in your email, or there's the link that you can put directly into your browser. Kelly has asked, do I see any compatibility issues with Apple? I don't think so. Kelly, when you say this is something that can cause an issue currently, do you mean with Teams or do you mean EPA Pro? So, okay, with Apple, there are currently issues with Learning Assistant. I've checked the minimum requirements and the requirements for EPA Pro, and the technology team haven't highlighted that there should be any issues with Apple. So I'm not foreseeing any, but we've got a quick note of the question, and we'll just check that. Okay, so this is the team site. Now, what you will then go through, once you reply to this email, there'll be a number of steps that you need to go through to set up your access to Teams. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly because they're very simple steps and involve clicking through a few screens. So you'll receive the email, you click on Open Microsoft Teams. What that will then do is take you to a link, this Microsoft link here, and you need to enter your email into that field there and press next. Once you do that, you'll be taken to the screen. And what it will ask you is whether you want to use the web access for Teams or to get the Windows app. Now you can do either. You can install Teams onto your computer, if you want to, or you can just use it through the web application. It makes no difference. I find that the computer installed app works better, but that's entirely up to you. Once you access that, you'll be given to this page, which invites you to join City and Guilds Teams. You have to click continue to accept that invitation. A permission screen then comes up and you click accept to go on to the next page. And then there are a number of screens that you have to go through, which is about the setup. Just click next on all of those until you get to the You're Ready screen, and we click Let's Go. Now we'll give you this deck so it'll talk you through, it'll show you the steps, but they are very simple. It's a case of clicking through a number of screens. Once you have access, so as an IEPA, you will have access, and as a LIEPA, you will have access. I've already said this. Now, what you can see on the screen is the IEPA access. So this is Teams. And what you'll see on this panel here is something called Assessor Submissions. If you're an IEPA and you want to submit evidence into the SharePoint folder, you will click on Assessor Submissions. And just to say, all of the steps that come before, you only need to do that once. So in order to put information on SharePoint, the IEPA would enter Teams, and this is the starting point for them. This is what they would see. So they would enter Teams through the link. They would see Assessor Submissions. They would click on that, and then it will show them which of the standards they can access. So those standards will be set up for the IEPAs, and they select the correct standard that they are uploading documents for. Select the correct standard and then click Upload. Now that upload will take them to the folders on their local computer, and at that point they would select the files that they've already prepared on their own computer, and they will be uploaded into that area of SharePoint. And that's all the assessor needs to do. They need to set up everything, and then there are 2 steps for them to upload documents. They need to enter Teams, select the standard, and then upload the document. Any questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to move on then. And as we've said here, for the IEPA, they've selected the file they've saved locally, and then when it's uploaded, they'll see it looking like this. They'll see it there for a matter of seconds, and then it will magically disappear. And the reason it will magically disappear is because that naming convention is taking it to the right location for the LIEPA. Any questions? Hi, Sean.
Hi, it might be a daft question. If you already have Teams on your computer, I mean, I use Teams anyway through my organisation, so will it make any difference? Will it show separately for City and Guilds?
I don't think so. I think what you'll do is you'll get an invitation to a City and Guilds Teams site, and so that channel will become visible to you when you enter Teams.
Yeah. City and Guilds icon will appear on the Teams.
Possibly. So what you do is and I can check that for you, Sean, but what you'll do is you'll have access to that channel, because I mean, it's the same piece of software, but you have access to different channels through it. So let me just check with the technology team as to what will appear for you, but I don't see that to be a problem, because lots of us so I use Teams for lots of different reasons, but I have access to different channels on it.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Right, okay. So what I'm going to do, there isn't a question. This will show the channel for the standard they are, IEPA and LIPA. So, okay, thanks, Libby. So what Libby's just clarified is that if you're using Teams for something else, as we've said, you will have access to the channel that you are the standard of which you're working in. So that will appear to you in the channels that you have access to, Sean. Okay, so before we go on, I just wanted to show you what this now looks like for a LIPA. And for a LIPA, we have a little video to show you of what this looks like. So just bear with me. So your IEPA has gone into SharePoint. They've saved the documents. So as a LIPA, how do I access that? So again, we'll provide you with this information, but Mandy and Libby, Mandy's kindly prepared a video to show you. So let me just talk you through this. Okay, so I'm just going to go back a step. So as a LIPA going in, you're going into the Assessor Hub, that's what it's called, and you will see the standards. And as Mandy's just told you, there are a number, you will see the ENR number for each of the apprentices. And under each ENR number, they are all apprentices. You will find the documents that are relevant to that learner. Now, as I've said, because you are LIPAs across a number of IEPAs, not all of these students will be relevant to you. It will be the students, so the apprentices here are relevant to the standard, but there will be some that you will not need to QA because you're not managing the work of that IEPA. I just wanted to underline that. So I'm just going to pause there. I just wanted to show you that. Are there any? I wanted to show you the view from an assessor perspective. Are there any questions at that point? Okay. Now, just to reassure you, I know this is not ideal. Ideally, the documents would all be in one place, but we've tried to make it as simple as possible for the LIPAs to access the information. And the technology team are working on a solution as quickly as they can to mean that we don't have to have documents in two different places. So through beta, I'm hoping that we start to get a solution that means that the documents will all be saved on EPA Pro. And with small volumes, again, at the beginning of beta, we're not expecting a huge fan of apprentices right at the beginning. I'm hoping that the impact on you as leaders will be limited. Okay, so just moving on. So we've talked a bit about the processes. We've talked about how to QA on EPA Pro. We've talked about the reports that you'll have access to help you manage your workflow. And finally, we've spoken about SharePoint Teams and how you'll be able to access the assessor information on SharePoint. So we're at the last section now. So I just wanted to run through a few points that came up last week to round off the presentation. So one of the things that was raised last week that I wanted to run through with you is some concern around the role of the IEPA. Because the IEPA is having specific contact with the provider, there was a lot of concern about, well, you know, what if the provider contacts them directly for queries that are not relevant to the IEPA's role? So I just wanted to reassure you that what we've been doing with the customers through beta is we've been explaining to them the role of the IEPA, what the IEPA will do, and what the IEPA will definitely not do. And that has been part of the comms that has been worked through with our customers. We'll monitor this through beta, and we need to, we'll get feedback from the IEPAs, but it's really important that I wanted to underline that. That is something that is being worked on with the customer. On top of that, we've clarified these beta contact points. So there are, you as IEPAs and LIEPAs, there are a number of contact points that we put in place. And the first one is customer services. So if there is anything that is, if there's anything to do with the event that you've been allocated, if it's a go-to-meeting event, if there are issues with the process, issues with go-to-meeting, or the event itself, the apprentice hasn't turned up, then this is the contact that the IEPAs and LIEPAs will use. It's the EPA booking team, and that's the team that you currently contact now. If there are more general queries from the customer, they want to have an appeal, they want an EAR, they want to request additional feedback, they've got complaints, then we're informing the IEPA to refer them immediately to customer services. So it's really important that the IEPA and LIEPAs have a channel to sort of channel those queries should they come up. So we've included the contact details there for customer services. If there are any system support issues or any issues with SharePoint, we've got our friendly EPA super user, which is Libby, who you've spoken to a lot over the last couple of weeks. Sorry, just go back a step. And that's the contact details for those. So if there are any system issues and the system isn't working, or if there are any issues with SharePoint not working, then Libby is the contact. The EPA Pro support is the contact there. And then as normal, any specific queries for IEPAs, they would be contacting you as a LIEPA. We are expecting feedback to come through to us sort of informally. So I think the associate managers will be checking in with the IEPAs and the LIEPAs as they move through the process. But as we've said, there's also a formal process for collecting feedback, and we'll be sending out surveys and having conversations with the IEPAs and LIEPAs as we move through beta to understand, what are the pain points, what do we need to look at as we move forward. Any questions at this point? Okay. So another point that came up last week, and I wanted to underline this. We were asked the question as to whether we would be providing IEPAs with their own email addresses. And I think at this stage for beta, we've decided against that. It's under review, so we will continue to look at that, and we'll look at how it's worked through beta to evaluate that properly. What we are doing is providing email guidance about how people should use their email, and also how to put together an email signature so that actually when you are contacting the provider, there is a standard approach to doing that, and it's accompanied by the independent assessor badge. So we'll be, there is some guidance here, so about the email signature. It shouldn't be used to misrepresent your role, and it shouldn't be a work account as well. So and so we're going to be issuing some guidance to our IEPAs about how they use their personal emails when they contact the provider. Okay. Any questions at that point? Okay, so all that remains to be seen is actually next steps. As we've said, there was this training that needed to be done for LIEPAs. The next step now is to finalise the support materials. I'm very conscious of the fact that there is one apprentice on the system waiting to be assessed, but the support materials will be finalising today, tomorrow and Monday, and they will come out to you, and they will be provided through the normal IEPA material site, right, Jim? Is that correct? So your normal site where you may have access to your materials, the general materials and for your specifics, we'll put the materials on there and there will be comms going out to explain what is there and how you can use it. Assessments will start taking place. As I said, we expect a drip feed of those to come through over the next couple of weeks, and we will be doing feedback and surveys with you, plus collecting some sort of informal feedback through the channels like the associate managers over the next couple of weeks. All right, that's all I wanted to go through today. So I'm just going to pause and give you the chance to give any feedback or any questions. Okay, so at that point, I just want to say thank you so much. I know these webinars are quite hard work. It's a lot of me talking and showing. I don't really like doing that, but there's a lot of you listening. But again, we've had some really, really useful questions, and continuing to work with you through the beta to understand how this process needs to evolve and how the system needs to evolve will be really valuable to us. So thank you so much for your time and your attention this afternoon. And we'll be in contact very soon. Thank you.